you and Chris
Yes, thank you.
are both co-hosts today. So thank you very much for joining us today, and good morning. Welcome to the Cultural Integration Fellowship. Since many of you are new, I would want to give you a bit of history about the Cultural Integration Fellowship. We were founded in 1951 by Dr. Haridas and Beena Chaudhary as a center of universal religion and spiritual practice. And in keeping with the spirit of unity and diversity, we honor the spiritual traditions of diverse cultures and religions. Today, we have gathered for the spring celebration of the Naw Ruz festival, the Baha'i New Year, which has been put together by our longtime member, Machine. And Chris French will be the MC of the program. So before I hand over the screen to Chris French, I just want to say a few words introducing him. Chris French is a Bay Area resident with what he says as at least two personalities. Chris works in technology, but spends most of his time playing music. He's worked as a professional musician on stage and in the studio for the last 40 years. And Chris has been member of the Baha'i faith since 1987. However, before I hand over the screen to Chris, I just want to read a beautiful poem from Dr. Haridas Chaudhary, our founder. And this poem is from this collection called The Rhythm of Truth. The poem is titled, Thy Name is Peace. Oh, the nameless transcendence. Thy name is peace. Peace within and peace without. Peace above in the boundless blue. Peace below in friendliness true. Peace in the galaxy of shining stars. Peace in the happiness of singing birds. Peace in the ocean's endless expanse. Peace in the lover's thrilling romance. Peace in the summits of mute mountains. Peace in the freshness of running fountains. Peace in the wonders of the world of sense. Peace in the depths of human experience. Peace in the sphere of unceasing action. Peace in quiet and relaxed contemplation. Peace in the travail of new creation. Peace in death and cyclic dissolution. Peace in the midst of struggling nations. Peace in the march of civilization. So as we contemplate on these words of Dr. Haridas Chaudhary, let's welcome Chris French. Welcome, Chris. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Kundan, for those words, for that beautiful poem, and for hosting us today. We really appreciate the continued friendship and collaboration with Cultural Integration Fellowship, and now online for this online celebration today. I just want to say we know that there were many people that wanted to attend today's celebration than actually could, given the Zoom limitations. So we'll be posting a recording of this to YouTube in the next few days. So I want to welcome you all today, to thank you all for coming, and wish you all a happy Naw Ruz. To begin, I think it would be helpful to answer the question, what is Naw Ruz? Naw Ruz is a celebration of springtime that goes back many thousands of years. Naw Ruz is Farsi for new day. And while every day is in some ways a new day, this particular day has special circumstances surrounding it. Many peoples and cultures across the globe celebrate Naw Ruz. Historically, those in Iran, Afghanistan, the Kurdish regions of Iraq, Turkey, Syria, Central Asia, but now in fact all around the world, including right here in the US, as you can see. I'll talk a bit more about what Naw Ruz is in a moment, but let's talk for a moment about when Naw Ruz is. When Naw Ruz is determined by the exact time the Earth's path around the sun aligns with the equator. At that moment, day and night are of equal length. Usually, this once-a-year phenomenon occurs sometime between the 19th and 21st of March. This year, it's on March 20th. That's today. So, happy Naw Ruz. Now a bit more about what Naw Ruz is. We are Baha'is, and for Baha'is, Naw Ruz is much more than just a celebration of springtime, more than just a particular alignment of the earth and sun on a certain day. Tomorrow's the first day of the Baha'i calendar, marking the new year. For Baha'is, Naw Ruz is a time of spiritual rejuvenation, of spiritual awakening. Leading up to this day, we have been fasting, doubling down on our prayers and meditations, deepening our gratitude and compassion and wonder at our lives in this time and place, communing as deeply as we can with our spirits, and doing our best to detach from material things, including ignoring that nagging growling in our tummies as we fast. There are Baha'is throughout every part of the globe. The Baha'i faith is the second most widespread religion in the world, in fact. And all Baha'is are celebrating Naw Ruz in their communities with beautiful music, dance, food, and color. At this point, we're going to show a 5-minute video featuring 3 artistic presentations, which were actually performed at the Cultural Integration Fellowship location in San Francisco as part of earlier Naw Ruz celebrations. This was when we could gather in person for such things. Hopefully we can do that again soon. First, you'll see Fatima Berenji dancing a piece entitled Baran Baran, dancing in the classical Persian style. Next will be Julia Zharova dancing to Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake. And lastly, soprano Susanna Plolitsa and pianist Dmitry Kogan performing a piece by Rimsky-Korsakov with lyrics by Leo Tolstoy. Note that the last 2 pieces are by Russian composers and Russian performers, given their names, as far as I can tell. And I'd just like for us all to remember the beautiful things that have come out of that country and to pray for the people in that region that is so troubled at this time. So, without further ado, please enjoy. Seeing those performances reminds us of the many wonderful Naw Ruz gatherings we've celebrated at the Cultural Integration Fellowship in past years. We're grateful to them again for celebrating this special holy day with us today. Naw Ruz, the holy day, was instituted by Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith. Baha'u'llah ordained that this day be celebrated as the first day of the Baha'i New Year. For Baha'is, this day has great significance as the beginning of a new spiritual springtime, the dawn of a new day, a new era, a new age of peace and reconciliation, of love and unity, of justice and security, of concord and harmony. Baha'u'llah brought a new revelation to humanity, new guidance, and teachings to revive all peoples, to unify us, guide us, and protect us in this modern age. I'd like to share with you now some of the Baha'i writings that refer to the significance of this day. Soon the whole world, as in springtime, will change its garb. The turning and falling of the autumn leaves is past. The bleakness of the winter time is over. The new year hath appeared, and the spiritual springtime is at hand. This sacred day, when the sun illumines equally the whole earth, is called the equinox, and the equinox is the symbol of the divine messenger. The sun of truth rises on the horizon of divine mercy and sends forth its rays on all. This is the beginning of the spring. When the sun appears at the equinox, it causes a movement in all living things. The mineral world is set in motion. Plants begin to sprout. The desert is changed into a prairie. Trees bud, and every living thing responds, including the bodies of animals and men. The rising of the sun at the equinox is the symbol of life, and the human reality is revivified. Our thoughts are transformed, and our intelligence is quickened. The Sun of Truth bestows eternal life, just as the solar sun is the cause of terrestrial life. I'd like to invite you to reflect on how each of us can play a role in this spiritual rejuvenation of the entire planet. Let us think about how we can revive our spirits and adorn ourselves with new life, fresh attitudes, bold new action, peace, and fellowship with all nations. In this spiritual springtime, let us create a new mindset, a greater unity, a healing of the nations, a new social reality. Here are more of the Baha'i writings to speak to this new reality. The tabernacle of unity has been raised. Regard ye not one another as strangers. Ye are the fruits of one tree, and the leaves of one branch. The earth is but one country, and mankind its citizens. Lift up your hearts above the present, and look with eyes of faith into the future. Today the seed is sown, the grain falls upon the earth. But behold, the day will come when it shall rise a glorious tree, and the branches thereof shall be laden with fruit. This is a new cycle of human power. All horizons of the world are luminous, and the world will become indeed as a garden and a paradise. The gift of God to this enlightened age is the knowledge of the oneness of mankind and the fundamental oneness of religion. Now for a brief song. The video you're about to see is a song containing a Baha'i prayer, asking that our gathering be illumined by the light of divine providence. The images you'll see are of Baha'i temples all around the world, all of which are sacred public spaces open to people of all faiths and backgrounds. Here is Ray of Light by Christopher Fazy.
Oh, divine providence, shed a ray of light upon this gathering, that it may become illumined. Shed a ray of light, a ray of light, shed a ray of light. Oh, divine providence, shed a ray of light, shed a ray of light on this gathering, that it may become illumined. Shed a ray of light, a ray of light, shed a ray of light, shed a ray of light, a ray of light, shed a ray of light.
As we mentioned earlier, for Baha'is, Naw Ruz is a time of conscious spiritual renewal. Just as flowers and baby birds and melting snow of spring signify a rebirth of our physical existence, we seek to bring about a spiritual cleansing and rebirth at this time. We do this both for ourselves and for the world we want to heal and serve. To be a Baha'i means to believe in the oneness of humanity, the oneness of all people, the oneness of religion, the oneness of God, and to act in ways that will unite all peoples and spiritually rejuvenate the entire human family. In that spirit of conscious spiritual healing and rebirth, I can think of no better presenter for today's gathering than our guest speaker. I am extremely honored today to present to you Dr. Elena Mustakova Posart, an educator, social scientist, professor in psychology, and a practicing counselor and psychotherapist. Dr. Elena's work combines compassionate psychotherapy with a profound spiritual wisdom, some of it drawn from her deep immersion and study of the Baha'i writings. In her work, she not only shows us how the world's traditional organizing principles have led us to the many problems we see today, she also outlines practical ways that we can address those problems individually within ourselves and together as a human family. Most of us have heard Gandhi's quote, "Be the change you want to see in the world." In her recent book, Global Unitive Healing, Dr. Elena maps out many powerful paths that we can take to do just that, to become what we wish to see in the world, to gain a sense of oneness with ourselves, oneness with all the world's peoples, oneness with God and all creation. She teaches us how that sense of oneness, which we all seek to know deeply within ourselves, is available to us all. Her talk today is entitled The Spiritual Psychology of Unity and Healing. Please welcome Dr. Elena Mustakova Possart.
Thank you so much, friends, for this tremendous honor. I cannot express how grateful I am for this forum, for this cultural fellowship that is encompassing the globe, and that year after year is building the bonds of fellowship, trust, and mutual understanding. It is powerful that we're here today exploring unity and healing and celebrating this new day, this divine spiritual springtime, which humanity has recognized for many, many centuries. And while we're celebrating with the beautiful music, the beautiful performances that were shared, thank you so much, Chris, for this beautiful program. We cannot forget that we are living in a very, very dramatic moment. While we're celebrating, while many people around the world are celebrating Naw Ruz, bombs are falling on innocent women, children, sick people, and the elderly. People are being dug out from underground shelters only to be forcefully transported into the country of their invader. Deported, shall I say. The world is watching in shock because most of us thought that we have already transcended this level of primitive violence. And it is hard for us to make sense of what is going on. So there are lots of reasons to celebrate, and there are lots of reasons also to pause and reflect on what we're actually living. And from all my years in clinical and educational practice, it is my impression that there is in ordinary people a deepening sense of confusion and disorientation, even despair, because it is hard to understand what is really going on. And so a spiritual perspective, like the one that was already shared here today, is very powerful in helping us make sense of what we're living and what is happening right now. In the Baha'i revelation that, as you heard, began in the mid-19th century, it was clearly articulated that the central organizing principle of all reality is the evolution of human consciousness. When we take this global historical evolutionary approach, it becomes a little easier to make sense of the tremendous tension that we're living in right now between the powers of light and the powers of darkness, the powers of unity and our shared humanity, and the powers that seek to divide and control. This is a dramatic time. It is a time that will see the evolution of human consciousness to a whole new level of integration and coming together. But it is not easy. It is very painstaking. And that's what I'd like to focus a little bit more on today. Abdu'l-Baha, and you see his picture behind me, who was the son of Baha'u'llah and a beloved spiritual teacher who taught all over the Middle East and Europe at about the same time that Sri Aurobindo was teaching in the Far East. Abdu'l-Baha had the following explanation for us based on the teachings of his Blessed Father. He explained that human consciousness evolves through collective centers of illumination. And these collective centers organize human affairs and advance them. And here's what he had to say. In the contingent world, there are many collective centers which are conducive to association and unity between people. Patriotism is a collective center. Nationalism is a collective center. Identity of interests is a collective center. Political alliance is a collective center. The union of ideals is a collective center. And the prosperity of the world of humanity is dependent upon the organization and promotion of the collective centers. Nevertheless, all the above institutions are in reality the matter and not the substance, accidental and not eternal, temporary and not everlasting. With the appearance of great revolutions and upheavals, all these collective centers are swept away. Friends, it appears that that's exactly the time we're living in right now. The existing collective centers such as nationalism, identity of interests, are being swept away. And we're looking around to see the emergence of a new order of collective center, a new center, a new qualitatively new center of illumination that can actually unite humanity. And that is an evolutionary process that we're in. Of course, it is difficult to grasp this evolutionary process after many centuries of living under the illusion of our separateness. This illusion of our separateness was really highlighted by contemporary science in the last few centuries in its efforts to improve upon the indiscriminate dominance of religion in the past over all quest for knowledge and truth. And so modern science set out on its adolescent endeavor for differentiation, and it claimed its ability to study the universe and reality by studying and measuring its separate parts. We were so fascinated by the discoveries and advancements of this kind of science and all the contributions that it made to material civilization, that we grew into believing that indeed that must be the only reality, or at least the only reality that matters. And here we are now, trying to sort out how is it possible that in the presence of so much knowledge, we are seeing countries being destroyed in front of our eyes and children killed. It does not make sense in the age of advanced science, which we have the capacity to go to the moon and beyond. Well, this illusion of separateness was first overcome scientifically by advanced modern science, which in recent decades really began to come of age. Quantum physics spoke very clearly about the primacy of consciousness over matter and about our interdependence and the importance of our alignment to these spiritual laws of reality if we are to thrive and evolve together. But we haven't quite caught up. We're still suffering the unexpected impact of adolescent science, which left many people, of which I write in my recent book. I share clinical vignettes of many lives caught up in the illusion of isolation. One of them is the story of Julia, who was a wonderful humanitarian. And Julia was looking everywhere for a way to contribute to a greater purpose in life. The one place she was afraid to look was to a greater redeeming spiritual reality that can give direction and purpose to our lives. And to me, Julia reflects the condition of millions of people all over the world now, and many that I've seen in my office who somehow cannot quite realize that what we touch and can measure is really not ultimate reality, that our ultimate reality is consciousness. So now it is time for humanity to come of age. And that means to awaken to our oneness, to our interdependence, the evidences of which are all around us. And it is that realization that heals countless forms of suffering. And friends, as we all know, in the last 2-3 years, we have had a series of increasingly intense reminders of our interdependence. Clearly, the universe is saying to us, the time is now. First, we experienced the pandemic, which from one corner of the globe, within weeks, paralyzed the whole planet, interrupted global trade and supply chains, and left humanity perplexed as to what is really happening. And also, we were forced to rethink a lot of our ways. Just as we were hoping that maybe we could return to life as we knew it. Scientists came out with the most recent report telling us that we're in the midst of a climate crisis and we have no more than 8 years to reverse what will soon become irreversible climate processes, bringing disaster on every part of the planet. And while we were still processing what that means, we found ourselves in the midst of war in Central Europe. And we're now witnessing Ukraine being leveled with the ground, bombs and missiles falling on people. And the world is poised precariously on the edge of a much greater conflagration, as it is also wondering how it could possibly stand for truth and justice in this context. So what does all of that have to do with the psychology of healing? Well, friends, every variation of mental suffering that we see in our offices speaks of some form of brokenness of the human bonds of love and compassion and a resulting fragmentation. The healing process is a process of reconnecting to ourselves, to our souls, to each other, to our families, communities, societies, to nature, and to our world, and finding a meaningful path forward. That is what healing is all about, the movement from fragmentation to integration. In Global Unitive Healing, I illustrate these processes of reconnecting to our core spiritual reality through many different lives and paths. And I also illustrate how much science and scientific understanding we already have that confirms what our wisdom traditions have taught humanity since the dawn of civilization, of our oneness and interdependence, and the laws of spiritual reality. So friends, this integrative scientific understanding, which we now see rapidly spreading, was clearly foreshadowed in the mid-19th century by Baha'u'llah's teachings. These teachings emphasized for the first time in direct and modern language the complementarity of scientific and spiritual methods of inquiry into the one and indivisible reality of all life. The complementarity of scientific and contemplative methods of inquiry. Friends, this was first announced in the mid-19th century. Who was thinking in those terms, in those evolutionary terms then? It was also articulated at that time that spiritual growth is both an individual and a collective evolutionary process. And it is very important for us to align ourselves to the oneness of reality. These teachings laid the groundwork for quantum physics as we know it, for interdisciplinary research as we now know it. It laid the groundwork for the interfaith movement, which began literally a year after the passing of Baha'u'llah. And it also laid the ground for the interspiritual movement, which is very strong in the world today, and of which this gathering is a wonderful illustration. So allow me to just give you one example of how these teachings laid the groundwork of our integral understanding today. Compare this 1944 statement by the father of quantum theory, Max Planck, who said in 1944, all matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force. We must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. Now compare this to the following statement by Baha'u'llah at his deathbed in 1891. He said to all gathered by his bedside, a mighty force, a consummate power lieth concealed in the world of being. Fix your gaze upon it and upon its unifying influence, and not upon the differences which appear from it. So here we are today, friends. In order to transcend these crises that are unraveling our planet, we have to fix our gaze on this transcendent, uniting force that is our core reality, and not be so over-focused on the diversity of its expression in our different lives, in our different expectations and desires. So these teachings transformed in one generation tens of thousands of ordinary and often illiterate people, very oppressed people, in corrupt and backward Iran, into agents of personal and social change that quickly became a threat for the establishment. Thousands of these people were put to death, and many are still being put to death and imprisoned and tortured. However, the principles of individual and societal spiritual transformation are empowering people all over the globe today, in every corner of the world. They are they're breaking the chains of antiquated mindsets and creating qualitatively new kinds of families, communities, and social processes that correspond to our coming of age as a human family. The spiritual principles which guide this process can be compared to an alphabet, a new alphabet, where each principle, each letter of this alphabet is an opportunity that points us on the path to healing and planetary peace. Friends, some of these principles were already beautifully mentioned and illustrated, and I will mention a few more, but let us remember that if we think of these spiritual principles as just the letters of the alphabet, then we, each of us, through our actions, through our choices, are creating the language from these letters. What language are we creating now? Are we creating a language of healing and unification? The power is in us. As we read in the quote, this is a new cycle of human power. We have the capacity to create every step of the way a unifying spiritual language that brings together all of our beautiful and diverse traditions and shows our common evolutionary core. Some of these principles that were so clearly articulated in modern language in the mid-19th century are, for example, the harmony, the importance of harmony between the material and the spiritual, because reality is one. What does that mean? We cannot show aggression, we cannot foster divisiveness, and at the same time proclaim religion, the unity of the spiritual and the material. We cannot have religious services while we're invading a country and killing thousands of people. Material and spiritual reality are one, and they have to correspond to each other. The rest are empty claims which we have to transcend. Another spiritual principle is the importance of awakening and alignment with the spiritual laws that govern reality. that well-being and health are impossible without such alignment. And that alignment is regardless of which religious or humanistic tradition one draws upon, because these principles are universal. Another spiritual principle is the need to eliminate the divisions between us versus them, because humanity is one interdependent family. And the fragmentation of this family results in psychological suffering, as well as social and planetary suffering. Yet another spiritual principle is the need to draw on scientific analytical ways of knowing, combining them with contemplative and artistic ways of grasping life and reality. This speaks to the unity of the value spheres. And for so long, we have prized science well above and beyond contemplative and artistic ways of knowing. We have to restore the oneness of the value spheres. We have to restore the oneness in how we come to know and how we come to be in this world. These principles lead to intrapersonal integration through self-knowledge and the cultivation of love. And of course, fasting, which is common in most wisdom traditions, and which is the last day of the Baha'i fast today, is a very conducive practice to intrapersonal integration, reconnection to our soul, to our own being. That, of course, is only as true to the extent to which it is expressed in interpersonal integration, in unity among us, in building bonds of fellowship that transcend our differences. And then there is the question of societal unity, which is the highest form of protection of the dignity of the individual and the collective. So, friends, if I can focus on one clear message within the context of this topic of spiritual psychology of unity and healing, that would be that the core condition of all human illness is fragmentation, and that the core of any healing is integration of the individual, the family, the community, and society. So may this gathering become the cause of deeper and greater integration. May its impact spread like circles around a stone, a pebble thrown in the water. May it encompass hundreds and thousands of suffering souls and help us awaken to the fact that in this great age, the Sun of reality, the manifestation of the unknowable essence, has spoken again, and it has proclaimed that it is time for collective humanity to come of age, to emerge from its combative and oppositional adolescence into its age of collective spiritual maturity. May it be. Thank you.
Wow, wow, wow. Thank you again, Dr. Elena, for that wonderful, timely, illuminating presentation. Um, we have some time to open up for questions, and if you would like to ask Dr. Elena a question, use the raise hand button, and our technician, Firuz, will unmute your mic. But maybe to get things started, I can ask you a question about this. I will say to everyone, I started to read Dr. Elena's most recent book, Global Unitive Healing, and it is, I have to tell you, it's a treasure. I'm not just saying that because you're here today, but I found in it a recipe book, a toolkit, a really practical way to heal myself and to heal my relationships, and then from that to hopefully heal the world. And I'm fascinated. I guess my question is, you talk about the central role of language and healing and building this new language, and without asking you to psychoanalyze me, I notice that my language to myself is harsh. My internal voice takes liberty, let's say, and takes advantage, and is not a noble language. It's not a healing language. Do you have practical steps for how to begin changing one's language, and that healing language that you speak of?
Thank you, Chris. This is a wonderful, wonderful question. And I want to say that really these harsh languages that we hear within our minds, often in our privacy, are not just our own making. Language reflects collective consciousness. We are born into language. We are exposed to language. In fact, before birth, um, the reverberations of language in utero are powerful formative influences. And if we think about human civilization having been undergoing many stages in its collective evolution, from infancy to childhood to adolescence, in these different stages, we have relied more or less on the use of force over one another, force over groups in order to prevail and survive. We have identified with our family, with our clan, with our tribe, more recently with our nation. And here we are, nation against nation. If consciousness for so many centuries has relied on the power to force and control, of course our language is going to reflect that harshness. It also does reflect those divisions. It reflects the hierarchies in the ways we perceive humanity as those that control and those that should be controlled. We also perceive that way ourselves. There are parts of us that we detest, parts of us that we are ashamed of, parts of us that we endorse. And all of that is reflected in language. And so to become conscious of the language that is constructing us in each next moment, that we're using as a formative tool with our children, with our families, with our social environments, is a very powerful act of awakening. And to change that language so that it does not reflect oppression, that it does not reflect hierarchies, that it reflects the dignity and the beauty of every soul and honors that dignity and beauty, is a huge, huge developmental leap. And so I wish I had a simple formula for that, but one thing that we all have access to is spiritual teachings. Spiritual teachings provide us with a language which is elevating. I find in the Baha'i language something that deeply healed my soul. I came out of communism. I grew up in a totalitarian regime in Bulgaria, where language was used to oppress. Language was used to put fear in our hearts at every moment, as people in Russia are living it right now. This language had left me deeply traumatized, and my exposure to the Baha'i spiritual language in my early 30s first left me in disbelief. I had not heard anything so harmonious, so dignified, so healing. I'd never been spoken to that way. I just couldn't even understand, what is this? How can it be so beautiful? How can it speak to the very core of complex reality without putting anybody down, without dividing? So I started to expose myself to this language, and it literally changed my soul. It healed my soul. And that is a path that is open to every one of us. When I work with people, I try to expose them to very brief selections, spiritual selections from various wisdom traditions. And it's amazing to me how no matter how traumatized people are, they always resonate. They always find something in these selections, which of course I try to find in a way that suits the person and their background, but they will always find something that really heals. So I would say in this age, we need to really pay attention to what we're hearing within and keep exposing ourselves and meditating on spiritual language, memorizing these beautiful verses so that they change our vocabulary and we can really think in terms of an alphabet of spiritual principles as we speak. What principles am I expressing with this sentence right now? Perhaps the search and independent investigation of truth, which has been elevated to a spiritual principle. Perhaps the principle of love and respect. So this is a deep evolutionary process, and we're all in the midst of it, because this is a time of light and darkness and a great dialectical tension within each one of us, in the language we use, in the language with which we think and speak, and in the world around us. A dramatic time. So thank you for the wonderful question.
Thank you for that amazing answer. I don't know if we're drawing to the end of our time, Kundan, but I think I should make closing remarks at this point. I show 11:58 on my clock. I want to thank you again, Dr. Elena, for that presentation, for your work. And again, I can't recommend highly enough to our participants Global Unitive Healing, that book. Get it, immerse yourself in it, incorporate that language, those tools, and heal your world with it. Heal yourself and heal your worlds. And thank you again for your work and for being here with us today.
Thank you.
In closing, I'd like to wish you all again a happy Naw Ruz. We're grateful you shared your time with us today, and we hope we have inspired you. Now go out there, refresh your spirits, and change your worlds. If you'd like to learn more about the Baha'i Faith, we invite you to contact any one of us on this program or go to baha'i.org, BAHAI.org, for more information. You can learn about Dr. Elena's work by searching for Elena Mustakova on Amazon Books. I also want to thank our gracious host, Dr. Kundan Singh, and the Cultural Integration Fellowship for their help with the program today. And finally, thanks to Firuz Najmetdinov for his technical assistance today. Thank you, Firuz. Goodbye, and thank you to all. Happy Naw Ruz.
Happy Naw Ruz. Thank you.
Happy Naw Ruz.
Happy Naw Ruz. Happy Naw
Thank you,
Ruz.
everyone. Goodbye.
Thank
Happy
you.
Naw Ruz. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Nasheen, for giving us the opportunity to host Naw Ruz with all of you. Thank you very much, Chris, for this beautiful emceeing that you have done. And last and not the least, many thanks to Dr. Elena for this wonderful presentation. And as I was listening to her, I was continually reminded of the harmony that the fellowship shares with the larger philosophy of Baha'u'llah and Abdul Baha. In fact, there's a beautiful story that I want to share with you all. I spoke about that very briefly to Elena and Chris before you all joined. The inspiration behind the Cultural Integration Fellowship, Mother Mira Al-Fasla, before she joined Sri Aurobindo in Pondicherry, India, was raised in France, in Paris. And she came to India for the first time in 1914. And I think it was probably around 1910 or 1911 In one of the gatherings which she used to hold on a weekly basis, she had invited Abdul Baha to give a presentation. And it's completely understandable in the sense that all the principles of the integral worldview harmoniously match with the teachings of Abdul Baha and Baha'u'llah. And as Dr. Elena was speaking, I was also reminded of this wonderful book which Dr. Haridas Chaudhary, our founder president, has written, titled Being, Evolution, and Immortality. And many of the things that he has spoken about here, I heard reverberated in Dr. Haridas' talks. Evolution, the critique of positivism, the emphasis on interdependence, the turn to move from fragmentation to unity, and not focus on fragmentation, but on the essential unity, which is the larger canopy in which all these different diversities play and dance. Thank you very much to all of you for making time to come to our gathering. And on behalf of the Cultural Integration Fellowship, I bring the meeting to a close. Have a wonderful day and happy Naw Ruz to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much,
Happy Naw
everyone.
Ruz.